here we have not two groups, like not an attacking group, like the rival fans who chant something anti-Semitic, and then a group like Spurs or Ajax fans taking over the slur and changing its meaning and responding to it. But actually we have another group there, which is part of both groups or not, and it's Jews. So it's more like a triangle. It's not like in linguistic reclamation. It's more like a triangle, which overlaps because Jews can be part of Chelsea fans chanting Hitler should gas them again, and they can be part of Tottenham or not.
What do Tottenham Hotspur, Ajax Amsterdam, Bayern Munich, and Austria Vienna have in common? Well, other than being central clubs in their country with a long tradition and one of each country's largest fan bases, maybe, well, they're all, for better or for worse, often seen as Jew clubs throughout their history. Sometimes more, sometimes less. And sometimes the club embraced this supposed Jewish identity. Often it didn't. Since Jew clubs, as our guest today calls it, not Jewish clubs. They were never founded as Jewish sports societies or anything like that. But clubs that have become kind of a canvas for the performance of Jewishness, of anti-Semitism, and also philosemitism, so the opposite of anti-Semitism. What does that say about the clubs? That's one question. What does it say about Europe's broader cultural and political discourse? It's another. What does it say about Jews in those clubs? Is also one question. But what does it say about how Jewishness is constructed? Is another. And Pavel Brunssen has written a fascinating book on it. He's a German who holds a PhD from the University of Michigan and is now a research associate and lecturer at the Research Center on Antigypsyism at Heidelberg University in Germany. There are a lot of voices from fans in there, from media, from online discourse, but it's also an academic book. It turns out that Indiana University Press has a fabulous series called Studies in Antisemitism, and that's the series in which this book appeared late last year. Before we get there, 3 more things. As always, and I won't give up, if you like this podcast, please give it a good rating, or please add a comment in the podcast app of your choice. It's the easiest, best thing you could do to help the assistant professor of football. I know, by the numbers, there are many of you listening who haven't done that yet, but who would like episodes like this one or the last one on Liverpool to reach more curious people interested in soccer beyond just game days and goals. So a rating or a quick comment are really the best thing you can do for the algorithms. Such is the world we live in. Also, I will be at the FootyCon in London in June. It's a 2-day conference intended to be kind of a mashup of academic culture and football culture, and I've never been. I'll be presenting something that came out of the 2 episodes on Ivica Osim in Bosnia from back in September. If you are there as well, let me know and say hi. And finally, very likely, I'll take a spring break 2 weeks from this episode, so the next one. I say very likely because everything is a bit in flux this spring. My children's spring break and mine don't quite overlap. Mine was actually this week. So if no new episode drops in 2 weeks, that is why. And in the meantime, please follow along on the socials. And now, how Jewishness and anti-Semitism is performed in and around European top clubs today that aren't actually Jewish, and why that is. Pavel, welcome and greetings across the big pond to Germany. You spent quite some time in the US as well. More on that in a second. But before we dive into your book, into what you're doing, what's your connection to soccer in general? How did you come to the beautiful game?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation and welcome to everyone listening. So I like to talk about my football club, although at the moment it's a quite difficult situation. So I grew up in Bremen, in the northern part of Germany, where Werder Bremen once was a very successful team. I grew up watching the floodlight during the week evening games, the international games against the big teams like Real Madrid and so on. And so I was fascinated by the lights, by the people going to the stadium. And the first time I visited the stadium, the Weser Stadium myself, I was 5 years old. And a couple of years later, I grew something like maybe a political consciousness. And I understood that people next to me were chanting about building a subway from Hamburg to Auschwitz, for instance. So they wanted to send the supporters and the club, the most rival club from Werder Bremen, to the concentration camp of Auschwitz. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was fascinated. I fell in love with the sport, with the stadium culture. And at the same time, I was irritated and disgusted that something so wonderful could have such an ugly side to the beautiful game as well.
Bremen is now known for a very reflective and often explicitly lefty fan culture. I know in part because there's contacts between my home club Sturm Graz and the Werder Ultra scene. Has that changed over a lifetime? Has that changed your way of dealing with the club? You said it's a hard time now. I'm assuming you refer to what's going on the pitch, but there's a lot that's happened there politically too since you heard that chant in the stadium, right?
Yeah, I would say in terms of sporting performance, the club probably belongs to the second Bundesliga, to be honest. But in terms of fan culture, it might be rightly in the first Bundesliga today. So when I started going to the stadium, the main fan groups or the most influential fan groups was called Standarte 88, which is the code for Heil Hitler, as well as the number of the SS division stationed in Bremen. And so you have an idea what the political everyday context around the stadium looked like. So there were neo-Nazis, there was far-right banners, chants, and people started to change it. And this was the time when I usually went most often to the games. And so I experienced the fan culture that was very much contested, that was very much changing, and that today is outspoken against neo-Nazis, against discrimination, and that also taught me a lot about the things I'm looking at in this book, like antisemitism, racism, discrimination, and that football has both a role in perpetuating stereotypes, but also in challenging them and working through them and negotiating identities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When you were in the US, did you pick up any American team you supported or you followed, the university teams at the University of Michigan, where you did your...
Oh, absolutely. I had season tickets for basketball and football at Michigan, at the Big House in the Chrysler Arena. So I went to every game. Actually, now in a few weeks, I will be again in Michigan to see a basketball game against Michigan State, the big rivalry. We have a great season at the moment, so I'm following the team still. I went to a lot of hockey games as well, a couple of soccer games only, so mostly football and basketball, because I learned that you can fall in love with another sport and choose a team there. But it's difficult if you have in one sport, you have one team, even if it's far away in the completely different league, to find a similar affection for a soccer team in another country. I don't have that. I only have Werder Bremen. And then for a long time, nothing. But I have still room in my heart for football, basketball, and other sports.
Yeah. No. Same here. And in fact, my first time at the University of Michigan was for a hockey game. Notre Dame played there. It was some important playoff game and went up with a friend to see.
I'd even argue that the atmosphere at the hockey games is even better than in basketball or
yes, the arena was great.
Football.
It was very
fast. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You only have like 4,000, but you have very interesting rituals of fan culture that you don't have in the same way in basketball and football, even though the Big House is, I believe, the number 3 worldwide biggest stadiums, or number 4.
Somewhere up there, yes. It's bizarre. Yeah. We just had an episode 2 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago now maybe, with an agent who helps place European kids at American colleges play soccer there. The dimensions are just unimaginable for Europeans. So what college sports can be like. Yeah. Good. So it's clear where that interest comes from. You mentioned the waking up to anti-discrimination work and anti-discrimination work in the stadium as well, with Bremen as a particular example. Where does the other part of your book come? Where does Jewish studies come in? Where do discrimination studies come in? And what's that academic path into the book?
So maybe I can continue telling the story of my journey by saying that I studied in Düsseldorf first, social pedagogy and social work.
Yeah.
And at the time in Düsseldorf, I met other people who were interested in the politics of fan culture. And we founded a magazine called Transparent at the time when fan culture was, in a way, very much under attack by some media outlets. I would even say most of them, and politicians. There was talk about ultra fans being the Taliban among the fans, and Johannes Beck.
That quote. So yeah. When was that? When were you in Düsseldorf?
That was around 2011, 2012.
Yeah. Yeah, the 2000s and leading up to the World Cup and then afterwards for a few years as well. It was a high time for that kind of rhetoric, yeah.
Exactly. And there was a lot of talk about fans, but no one really talked with fans, or very few people. And we wanted to have kind of a magazine that comes out 4 times a year, high journalistic standards, that changes the way people talk about fan culture and see fan culture and see it in the ambivalence. I mean, there are violence, there is neo-Nazism, there's all of that, but there's also the other parts that I encountered in Bremen, and my fellow editors at Transparent came from different clubs and different backgrounds. And so we came together to make this magazine and to change the discussions in a way, make them more diverse in terms of perspectives. And the second,
this is while you're a social work student, though, so you're not immediately thinking, I will be in academia, I'll be writing about this yet. Or is that what awakened the wish?
I think the many people and perspectives I came across during this work at Transparent kind of made me even more interested, and this was the time when I developed the interest in becoming an academic and writing longer books and making studies that take a couple of years out of my life and want to understand really the deep roots and the deep causes and the function of different things in a very deep way that I felt the way I was writing as a journalist was not accomplishing in the way that I thought was necessary or I wanted to do. And so there was a second development. So the one was the way people talked about fan culture. And the second was the developments in fan culture, namely that ultra groups clashed with hooligan groups across the country. There was this group in Aachen Ultras, with young people, and they were attacked even by far-right neo-Nazis together with hooligans in the stadium itself, at home, in the city, and they left the stadium. So for ultras,
that story ended exactly the other way from Bremen.
Exactly, yeah. So what are the differences between Bremen and Aachen? And we wanted to understand these developments in a way.
And then academically, University of Michigan. Now you're in Heidelberg, and this book, The Making of Jew Clubs, Performing Jewishness and Antisemitism in European Football Fan Cultures, appeared with an American publisher. Indiana University Press. So I can't not ask the question, what's the intended audience here? And are you getting the airplay in Europe that I think this book deserves with an American publisher?
I have to say it does. I'm very happy how the book is perceived. I was invited to give talks at the Eintracht Frankfurt Museum and discuss the book there and the relationship, between Bayern Munich and Eintracht Frankfurt. They also have a kind of a way of Jew club identity in their history storytelling, which is also a bit odd. St. Pauli Museum. There's this exhibition, Super Jews, that was shown in Vienna, and now it's in Germany. And I have given talks at both of these venues. And there will be a German translation of the book coming out as well. So I believe going with an academic publisher in the US helps to situate this book in the academic discussions about popular culture, Jewish studies, anti-Semitism. And the reviews so far show that it's well placed as an academic book, so far at least. And at the same time, I think it really bridges the gap, or has the potential to bridge a gap to a more public and wider audience, to club museums, club historians, fans. I know that, for instance, some Tottenham supporters bought the book at the Eintracht Frankfurt Museum because I was giving the talk the day before Eintracht Frankfurt played Tottenham, and I was in the stadium the next day. So the research continues.
That's actually very well, smartly placed by you, that talk. On the cover of the book, I'll say there's a scarf that's clearly recognizable, at least to insiders, as a Tottenham scarf. So I'm not surprised that the Tottenham fans picked that book up. You played that well.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. So Tottenham Hotspur is one of the clubs in there. The others are Ajax Amsterdam, Austria Vienna, the purple club in the Austrian capital. And if you want to know one snapshot from that story. The Matthias Schindler episode from 2 years back is probably worth a listen in this context as well, something that Pavel covers here too, and is one of the few who do it well, and who do it with regard for more contemporary sources too. And Bayern Munich. One level here is the involvement of actual Jews with the club. The other one is what you call the Jew imaginary framework that plays a role in how these clubs perceive themselves, but also in how they're perceived by others and what results in that perception. And I'll just read out your definition here. The Jew club is a Jew club in this book, not because it's Jewish, but, quote, because certain images, stereotypes, and stories are linked to that club. The Jew club has this conundrum that the relationship between the past and the present, between memory cultures, between group identities, and between historical and between contemporary anti-Semitisms, and it does not necessarily have to involve any Jew. So there's two levels happening here. This is not necessarily a straight-laced history of Jews in European soccer. That's not what it's intended to be. It's intended to be both a history and a present-day study of cultural concepts and how they operate in the stadium and how they operate based on past dynamics, but also on present-day realities. So that's the kind of Jew club that we're talking about. When you put that term out and say, here's who fits in that basket, Tottenham, Bayern, Austria, Ajax, as a few examples, did you get pushback on the term? Did you consider any alternatives to studying Jewishness and soccer than this imaginary framework?
So I chose the term Jew club to really differentiate them from Jewish clubs, because they are not understanding themselves as Jewish, like Maccabi, Hakoach, Tottenham and Ajax, for instance, are outspokenly against this part of their club identity. But
we'll get there. So the scarf on the cover is one of the banned ones.
So the Jew club term, I chose it because it's out there. And the Jew clubs are a reality, not as Jewish clubs, but as Jew clubs, because there is this public perception that they are Jew clubs. There is this anti-Semitism against some of the clubs. There is a part of self-identification in it. So there is an irritation that struck me kind of in the beginning of this project, like with Tottenham, for instance, Yid Army, the scarf on the cover. Is that
where the project started? I wonder. Tottenham and the Yid Army story.
The project for me started, I believe, 10 years ago. I was an MA student in Berlin at the Center for Research of Anti-Semitism and was working on my master's thesis on anti-Semitism in German fan culture. And I was co-organizing an international conference on discrimination in football, in soccer in Berlin. Mm-hmm. And in the lead up, there was another event in Amsterdam happening. And I traveled to Amsterdam to the Ajax Stadium, where they had kind of an international gathering, scholars, practitioners from football, so kind of bridging the two worlds, bringing them together. And there were people discussing the identity of Tottenham, of Ajax, and of some other clubs and countries. And I talked also to some Ajax people there, some fans, some people from the club, about the Israeli flag in the stadium, Jewish folk songs in the stadium, and they had very different perspectives on it. And even the talk kind of opened these irritations and questions like, okay, what is going on there? Is this anti-Semitism, philosemitism? Is this solidarity? Is this hatred? Is it all of it? And so I was fascinated and confused at the same time. And I believe this was the moment I started to wonder, is this a project that I want to have a comparative study of these clubs in the future?
Why these clubs then? I'll ask the question in a very stupid way. How does one become a Jew club?
Oh, it's not a stupid question at all. It's a core question. Mm-hmm. So it depends. Is the question, why did I choose these clubs, or why did these clubs become Jew clubs?
You are right. Those are two questions. Let's start with the first one first. How did these clubs become Jew clubs? And then how did you find them and make the decision of curating this book and outlining it in the way you did?
Yeah. So it seems there is really one club per country that is known as a Jew club. There might be others, but not in the same, like Frankfurt in Germany, but that's really on a small scale. So there's really the kind of one club around such an image evolves in a broad term known to the broader public. And with Bayern Munich, it's around the memory culture of the club and the former president Kurt Landauer, the Jewish club president, and the way in the early 2000s, the fans and later also the club embraced this image and narrated an identity around it. We were discriminated against by the Nazis as a Jew club because we had a Jewish president, which today we know is not the whole story, but this is why Bayern Munich. Austria Vienna, the main reason is the
Let me stop you right there with Bayern Munich.
Okay.
Is it just the figure of Landauer? Or isn't there already something else going there? The bourgeoisie, money, titles, what have you. Aren't there other aspects that then later feed into a stereotype of a Jew club that have to transcend at some point the presence of Jewish persons in order for a club to become a Jew club?
Two answers. First, today it is because of Landauer and the way the people remembered Landauer and made Landauer an identity figure around which they built this Jew club identity. Mm-hmm. But if you look into the history of the club, you find more. You find something like, okay, this club actually had the Jew club identity probably already in the early 20th century. It's hard to kind of find sources that really show this was actually the case because we find two moments in which the Jew club narrative appears in sources. The first one, as I said, is kind of a very contemporary one, early 2000s memory culture. And the second one is around the year of 1945, the end of Nazism, when in the process of denazification, Bayern members tell a story, we have been discriminated against by the Nazis. Yeah. But here I believe strongly that there's a reason why this happened at Bayern Munich and not at other clubs in around 1945, this kind of storytelling, we had been a Jew club. And this is because probably they had been known to some degree as a Jew club to the public, at least in Munich, if not in the whole country. And this is because among the founders of the club were some Jews. The president was a Jew, the coach was a Jew, the youth academy director was a Jew. So there were some important Jewish people, which is not that different from other clubs, but plays a role. And the club comes out of the area of Schwabing, a certain area in Munich that is linked to the university. And that was known in kind of public perception as something like a Jew quarter or something in a, playing with stereotypes and so on. But these intellectuals, bourgeois, artists, whatever,
globally
authors,
in a way that's unhealthy to the identity of a homogenous people, that kind of thing. Yeah. I lived there when I was a student. Schwabing was. Yeah. Okay. Good. And then how did you find them? These are all first division teams. They're all fairly successful throughout their history. Why those four?
The kind of obvious reason, because they are known as Jew clubs, and this is the topic of the book. What's going on with these clubs? What in this identity? What do they tell us about history, memory, antisemitism, football culture? And then the other reason is these were clubs that I felt I could get access to sources, I could travel to, I could understand. I speak German and I speak English, so Tottenham, Bayern, Austria.
Right. Again, and some smaller examples in Eastern Europe.
Yeah, and I learned some Dutch for this book so that I could read the fanzines and the kind of sources. Just enough to understand what's in it. But
Dutch is such a hard language to learn for a German, isn't it?
It's not that hard. Yeah, I could go with a club in Eastern Europe that is known as a Jew club, or even in South America or something. Yeah. But I thought, okay, no, I need 4 clubs that are where I can get access to the sources and really understand them and not have a language barrier.
And that makes sense. So Cracovia is the one that came to mind, right? stereotyping people. I'm imagining the situation about sources is much, much different. So what you found here, not just for clubs, but also for clubs that are, I think, relatively evenly matched. They each add something to the book, but in terms of the source base, in terms of how thick of a texture you're able to give these stories, for lack of a better term, I think they're evenly matched. So you learned Dutch, there's English, there's German. How was the source work, and what role did clubs play? We've had conversations in this podcast about club histories and club historians. Did you find them forthcoming? Did you go look for sources elsewhere regardless? And I'm talking about the more historical sources now.
Yeah. I was completely open for sources, and this really helped me. In the chapters on Bayern and Austria, for instance, you will find that I walked around the city and looked at stickers and graffiti, and what kind of culture do fans kind of bring into the everyday life of the city. If you go in a place that is completely different from the stadium, you still find these Jew club identities located and displayed and represented in the cities. I talked to fans, I talked to people around the clubs. Bayern Munich, for instance, was very helpful in terms of opening their archive. Tottenham Hotspur was the complete opposite. They completely shut down and said, no, we don't want this identity and we don't want nothing to do with it. Everything you can hear from us is on our website. Bye-bye.
Is that why you punished them by putting the Yid Army scarf on the cover?
It's not a way of punishing them. I mean, to be honest, it makes sure that they will not sell the book in their shop, because once they even had a book about Tottenham, not related to this identity at all, and they just mentioned the word at one time in a sentence without even kind of talking about this identity, but just kind of as a quote or reference or something. And then they found that the word is in the book on page, 187 or whatever. And they said, no, we're not selling this. This book needs to be banned from our shop. And they stopped selling it. So they will not be happy with the cover, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I bet. And that's fine. They can think what they want. The Tottenham and the Ajax example are particularly interesting when it comes to contrasting a simple study of discrimination, which this is not, or at least that's not all it is, with a story of how identities are made as well. What listeners may not expect from this discussion is that in at least two of these cases, the Jew reference internally is a positive one, is constructive at least to some fans. How does that work? How does one fan culture construct a positive identity, claim the kind of Jewishness over against the negative parts of the stereotype that we've mostly focused on so far? So Ajax and Tottenham in particular.
This question brings us to the 1970s, Netherlands and England, and into the context of two fan cultures where rival fans of these two clubs of Ajax and Tottenham start calling them the Jew club. Against Tottenham, they, for instance, were chanting things like Hitler's gonna gas them again. Against Ajax, fans were chanting Hamas, Hamas, Joden an het gas, Jews to the gas.
Yeah. And
in both cases, astonishingly, Ajax and Tottenham supporters took the identity, took the anti-Semitism and said, you call us the Jews? Well, we are the super Jews, the super Joden in Ajax. They started to sing Jewish folk songs like Hava Nagila in the stadium and celebrate a Jew club fan culture, not a Jew club fan culture. And similar with Tottenham, the fans in the late 1970s responded by calling themselves the Yid Army. And here we have a little bit of a difference because the term Joden is like the English Jew or the word Jude in German.
Yeah, so the Super Jews moniker in Ajax uses that descriptor, whereas Yid, I think you were about to say in Tottenham, is something different, right?
It's something different because it has always been used as a slur, as a negative word, different from the English Jew. And here they take it over as a badge of honor, as the marker for their identity, and they celebrate it.
role does religion and ethnicity play in this appropriation? Both in terms of the people that do it, I don't know, white North London guys, Amsterdam, where a significant part of the fan culture has migrant background as well, at least now. How is Jewish identity so malleable, so flexible that it can be claimed in that way?
You mentioned earlier this concept I call the Jew imaginary framework.
Right.
And I was thinking for a long time, antisemitism, philosemitism, what is going on here? How do they relate to each other? And learning that memory culture and collective identity are linked in these very specific ways in these clubs. And so we have this kind of web of or playing together between anti-Semitism, philosemitism, so ideas about Jews, negative and positive, and the commemoration of the Holocaust or kind of evoking of the Holocaust, even in chants like Hitler, Jews to the gas, or in terms of the Tottenham and Ajax fans, referencing Jewish history, Jewish identity, Jews. I felt what they have in common is that they are negotiating and evoking the figure of the Jew as something that is more than a Jewish person, a Jewish individual, but always Jews as a collective, the Jews. Yeah. And here something breaks.
Essence, right?
Yeah. And so they engage with something that is more imagined than real, but at the same time, these clubs are a space for Jewish people. So I interviewed, for instance, a Tottenham fan who was there in the 1970s when they were chanting Jews to the gas, and they made hissing noises to imitate the gas chambers whenever Tottenham players entered the field to warm up. And he was standing there shocked. Like, okay, this is against my club, this is against me, this is my family, against my identity. And astonishingly, in this context of violence and racism that was so rampant in the 70s and 80s in English football stadia, the Tottenham fans responded by, you call us the Jews? Well, then let's call ourselves the Jews. We are the great army, we're proud, come at us. So kind of it's a mix of provocation, appropriation, adoption, solidarity. I don't know. For every Tottenham fan, it's probably a different story.
Yeah.
But this fan told me that, and now he's retired, right? So he was there in the 1970s as an adult. So he has life experience. And he told me that in his life, he never experienced such a solidarity with Jews against anti-Semitism somewhere else. He only felt safe as a Jew in public, at the synagogue and the Jewish community, and in the stadium when around Tottenham fans, and at home, of course. And this matters. So there is a certain Jewish identity, agency in it, solidarity in it that matters. And on the other hand, I spoke to Tottenham fans who told me they are not going to Tottenham anymore because of the term Yid, which now is often referred to as the Y word, by the way, similar to the N word, as a race hate word. For them, this word, shouldn't be there, not even by Tottenham fans, and they stopped going even to the games because they say, I don't want to hear it, and I don't want my children to hear it. I don't want to go with my family. And so there's a diversity of Jewish perspectives on these identities that also is negotiated in these club identities.
The club Tottenham is coming down rather hard on those exercises in identity construction, as you mentioned. How is Ajax dealing with it? A city with a long Jewish past.
Ajax, the club, is ignoring it. So they did have a museum in the city a couple of years ago. They closed it. It was, I think, called the Ajax Experience or something. And there they briefly mentioned, is Ajax a Jew club? And they said, no, it's not. Now they basically have, if you go on a stadium tour, you see a wonderful stadium. It's modern. It's beautiful. They have wall paintings there, brilliantly made of Johan Cruyff, of the club legend. So it's worth a visit. It's one of the most visited sites in Amsterdam, by the way, the stadium tour. And you see something they call a club museum, but it's basically a trophy room. And they say something about the hard times. So they talk about National Socialism and the Second World War in very broad and I would even say apolitical or depoliticized terms. but they don't mention the Jew club at all, and they are not going to mention it. If someone asks them about it, they will say, "We're not a Jewish club. Leave us alone." No comment.
Do you think there is anything constructive in there that clubs should or could actually harness and do something with, at least deal with more openly?
Absolutely. Because these clubs are really, or these Jew club identities are for them clubs an opportunity to engage with the history and presence of anti-Semitism, of the identity of their fans, what is playing out with these collective identities. Bayern Munich, for instance, through their engagement through exhibitions, through discussing Landauer, they have every year in early January, they have a Shabbat dinner together with the Israelitische Kultusgemeinde, with the Jewish community and the club staff members of Bayern Munich. So this is not done with media presence or with public, but just kind of the people from these two institutions coming together and getting to know each other. And the opening opportunity why they are doing this is because of this Jew club identity. So there is room for discussing, getting to know each other, being open. For a lot of things. Austria Vienna as well. They gather around the 9th of November to remember the Nazi pogroms at the Judenplatz, at the Jewplatz in Vienna, the club Austria Vienna, and they give a speech against anti-Semitism, and the players are there. It's a public event. It's a statement. What do we as a club stand for? But it's also an invitation for, I would say, Jewish players, fans of whoever, to say this club is also a place for Jewish people. This is, and if done right, it's also understood as not only for Jewish people, but for Black people, for Muslims. This is an open club. Vienna is a big city. It's a modern city. It's a diverse city, and we want to be a club that is reflecting this. And this is part of our strengths, and not something we just want to kind of leave aside, because it's also a kind of not the reason, but it's used as a legitimizing factor for anti-Semitism and hatred by the fans of other clubs.
Yeah. Austria is an interesting case also because it is one of the clubs that had a neo-Nazi fan group leading in the stands until just a few years ago, fairly recently. The only one of those four clubs, I think, where that kind of setup happens. Do you have understanding that clubs, or can you empathize with clubs that shy away from that question in an age of marketability, of smooth public communication, that the Y word or the question of a Jew club is seen as a political lightning rod to rather stay away from if you want to appeal to a large, well, I don't know, in their boardrooms they might say base of customers, but to a larger fan community?
It's completely understandable. It's completely understandable. They have a global audience. They make hundreds of millions of dollars every season. And they don't want anything that distracts or irritates their sporting brand. On the other hand, however, I would say there is so much interesting ambiguity going on in these identities that for people who work with the fans of these clubs or who are invested in the club as a community, where I see the supporters and the fans as the most important part, more important than the player who transfers away 3 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, and who might become a legend. But the fans will stay the whole life, and they are the community of the club and the identity of the club more than the club management. This is a strong belief I have, and something I learned from studying these four clubs as well. Mm-hmm. And so with all this diversity I mentioned among the Jewish supporters alone of Tottenham, there's a lot to gain and to discuss and to learn from this different perspective on these identities, and to accept the diverging perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. any club or any research in here on these four clubs where you were at a point that you, where you hesitated to cover this? There's the topic is full of landmines, and we'll get to Israel at the end of the podcast too. But was there any moment in the book where you thought, risk of upsetting the audience, there's risk of shutting out a part of your potential audience as well with a topic like this and with how you cover it? Any particular parts in there that were particularly difficult to write in this time?
I researched the book before October 7, and I had written the manuscript before October 7. And after October 7, the book came out September 25. So there was a lot of time between, not a lot, but there was some time between the events on October 7 and when the book came out. And there were the peer reviews, and there were kind of my final revisions to the book. And I believe I had a note document open for several weeks, because I quickly understood this book will be perceived differently or read differently after October 7, because the whole topic of Jews, anti-Semitism, discrimination with October 7 and everything that come after it is just probably even more contested than before, even more heated than before, emotional than before, hurtful. And I figured, okay, I have to find a way to address the Jew clubs in the context of these debates and October 7. I started to rewrite the introduction. I deleted everything I changed, and I came up with, okay, I need to write an afterword. Like, I have done a work that I believe is complete, is compelling, I stand behind. But I want to reflect on, okay, this is the book I wrote, and October 7 happened. And so what are the Jew clubs after October 7? How did they respond to October 7? And what does this tell me, or what questions is it rising in relation to the main arguments and concepts discussed in the book?
So if any arguments there, any parts of the book that you felt, I have to think about this again, not in the terms of changing it, but in terms of continuing the story. Anything about the imaginary Jew framework that has changed, that is changing since you wrote this? As it pertains to course.
Yeah, what I like about this idea of the Jew imaginary framework is that it captures changes, small moments, nuances, but it's also something where you can make like big claims and arguments and say, well, this is how Jews are perceived, or X, and you can make like a sentence statement, but you can also look at the nuances. And changes are, for instance, if we look at Bayern Munich, that I tried to understand, like, how did this Jew club identity came into the club culture in the early 2000s, and I followed how the fans kind of started to embrace this identity and start to bring Landauer into the collective memory of the club and the city and the nation, and how this was done against the club management in the beginning, and then the club management started to embrace it, but it was the fans who really pushed for, not only for Landauer as an identity figure, for the Jew club narrative, but also for progressive politics in a way. I call it progressive traditionalism, because they have this idea of Landauer as a figure of the club tradition, and tradition is so important to a club culture. So they kind of created this club identity of progressive traditionalism. And now, after October 7, we see that the club is engaged in solidarity with the victims of October 7, with the hostages in Gaza, and is making statements on the website, please come to this demonstration against anti-Semitism and in solidarity with Jews. Nothing there about Gaza civilians or something, but kind of this solidarity with Israel, with the victims, with Jews in Germany. Mm-hmm. And the fan groups are silent about October 7. Usually they are very outspoken politically in terms of memory culture when it comes to Landau, but also in terms of, for instance, refugees.
Yeah, anti-discriminatory work.
Exactly. exactly.
I think what you mean by this, I like this term, the what was it called? Conservative or traditional progressivism?
Progressive traditionalism, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Harnessing a club's history to identify an inclusive legacy and kind of carry this forward. Yeah. And that's what the Bayern fans were pushing for. In this case, a more difficult conversation. At least that's what you're after.
Yeah. And kind of a change from the fans being the main actor to the club being the main actor, and the fans remaining silent on this topic, which they probably have very diverging and contrasting perspectives on. I assume, I don't know this, but since they are not outspoken about it or not even published something on Facebook, and the Kurt Landauer Stiftung has a daily post on Facebook about something on club history and events, and there's a lot of content, but nothing on October 7th. I found this interesting, yeah. Even specifically because there was one player who was involved in a heated debate in Germany, the defender who made a post after October 7 about victory to the resistance, I think was the phrasing, and there was at the same time.
Nusayr Mazraoui you're referring to,
exactly.
Right? Yeah, the term was total victory for the Palestinian cause, which was read as meaning the eradication of Israel, and that's the conflict then. Yeah.
Yeah, of what else? I mean, how else would you interpret it? Total victory after October 7? And at the same time, they had this Israeli goalkeeper in the same locker room.
Yes, yeah, Daniel Peretz.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they did something that I found interesting, that they didn't end the contract with Mazraoui. Something Mainz 05 did in a similar case.
Yes,
they said this is unacceptable behavior. We terminate the contract. You have to leave. And Bayern Munich instead said, in the face of a lot of public pressure, and they received a lot of criticism for this, said, no, we're not terminating the contract. We talked with the player. The player asked or kind of suggested, or I don't know if it was the player really, but there was a meeting between the player and people from the Jewish community in Munich. There must have been also talks with Daniel Peretz, I believe. It would be an interesting story to look in for, I don't know, maybe a follow-up paper or someone the readers might be interested in doing interviews with these players and the club and maybe the fans around this specific event, because Bayern Munich usually is doing the right thing. They think in terms of public relations, it seems like not engaging with Jewish history, with Nazism. We're a football club, leave it. Then they figure out this is a strong weapon of the ultras, or a strong case of the ultras, very well perceived by the public, and they start to embracing it and say, well, Landauer, we make him an honorary president, and they start to fall in love with him, I would even say. And they say, in the climate of Germany stands with Israel after October 7, they make similar statements that are, just kind of in the... with the national Staatsräson, the reason of state, as they call it in Germany. And then you have something where a lot of people criticize the club for not acting on antisemitism against Israel, which the post was perceived, but say, no, this is our player, and we do it different. I thought this was interesting, and would be interesting to look in, and why did Bayern Munich did it the way they did it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that and some other episodes raise the question how the Jew imaginary framework is changing right now as we speak. I think the book makes a compelling case that football, as it often is a great lens into not just the European Jewish experience after World War II here, but in how the idea of what is Jewish gets constructed, defended, and attacked in Europe during these decades. How about now? Not that I want you to write an afterword to the afterword, but what's going on in soccer around these clubs, but also Israeli teams in the European competition? Tell us about how the Jew imaginary framework is shifting, is changing, or is absorbing new features, perhaps. What do we learn when we look at the terraces?
Yeah, I mean, we clearly learn that Israel is the hot topic, is the elephant in the room, is the topic that the Shikaria, the ultras, the fans of Bayern Munich do not want to talk about, at least not in public, probably not even between themselves. So Israel, in a way, is a topic on everybody's mind and emotions. but a topic many people do not want to engage with, or have a fear to engage in a wrong way or whatever. So a lot of these questions circulate around Israel, even in classrooms, teaching on anti-Semitism or something. The students want to come to a classroom and want to understand, like, how can I talk about Israel in the way I see it? And the overlaps between anti-Israel hatred and anti-Semitism, but at the same time also legitimate criticism of Israel. And this is really a core topic at the moment, where a lot of the attention on the Jew imaginary framework centers. Jews in the streets here in Germany, they have to, respond to why they, as a Jew, do say something about Israel or not say something, or they all the time they are
their Jewish identity.
Yeah, are kind of seen as representatives of Israel, and there are high stakes in it.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that you mentioned there normally is one Jewish club or country. There is one majority Jewish nation in the world amidst many others too. The Jew among the football clubs and the Jew among the nations. Mm-hmm. These four clubs, have they responded differently? And does it match the kind of journey that you've mapped out for each of them in the book? You've already mentioned Bayern a little bit.
Responded to October 7, you mean?
Yes. Mm-hmm. To the contemporary situation.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. With Bayern, we see this change, like who's acting. Austria Vienna continued what they did before. They made a post on social media in solidarity after October 7. And this is what they did around November 9 or similar days over the last few years. They started to do it. They even used the same photo. So it was kind of in continuation of their efforts. Ajax Amsterdam is an interesting case. If we look at the fan culture specifically, the club didn't change anything. Silence. But the fans changed in a way because something happened there that never happened before. After October 7, a few Palestinian flags were shown in the fan section of the Ajax stadium. And this small fan group was attacked by other fans from the same club. So Ajax fans were fighting over the display of Palestinian flags in the stadium, even though Israel flags have more or less disappeared over the last, 10 years maybe. So the Jew club identity is still there in chants, but not in banners and flags. Mm-hmm. And after this happened, fan organizations started to call for leaving any national flags at home. This also happened before the game against Maccabi Tel Aviv, where these fights happened between Maccabi fans and people from Amsterdam. Not Ajax supporters, but people from Amsterdam. And with Tottenham, you also see a continuation in the way that the club tries to do everything right. They waited a few days before doing anything, and then the Premier League, so the official kind of league management, issued a statement about October 7th, and the club kind of copy-paste and did the same statement. However, with the fans, you can still see what happened there in the 70s, a room for Jewish experience and belonging. That, to my knowledge, this is the only soccer club in the world where Jewish people come together in the stadium to say a Kaddish, a morning prayer, Jewish morning prayer among themselves. And there was also one Tottenham fan. She was a hostage in Gaza, and people around Tottenham fans also were rising, creating attention for her situation.
Yes. In this case, Tottenham fan, I think in Germany in particular, played a role that fan groups had friendships with Israeli ultra groups, some of whose members were among the hostages too. So that direct personal contact, I think, played a big role in the first couple of years after October 7 in particular. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I actually wrote the paper together with Andy Markowitz, a friend and professor at the University of Michigan, trying to understand why there was kind of an exception in German football culture, namely the dozens of banners and statements by fan groups and also from clubs in solidarity with the victims of October 7 and the hostages. And we were thinking about the years of anti-discrimination work by fan organizations, groups, fan projects, the social workers engaged in football, and the contacts to Israeli clubs like Hapoel Tel Aviv and St. Pauli, Katamon and Maccabi Haifa and Werder Bremen and so on, and how these personal relationships also led to a situation where which played out with St. Pauli, for instance, in a very interesting way, where you had the club and fan groups in Hamburg making statements against anti-Semitism, and, well, there should be also solidarity with the victims of October 7, and international fan clubs said, no, this is on Israel, and if the club does not took a stance against Israel and pro-Palestinian, here's our fan club. We're not longer a fan club of FC St. Pauli, leave it. And this happened in various countries, and there were kind of these international fan groups against the German fan groups of St. Pauli.
With a very different background relating to Israel and to Jewishness. In the case of St. Pauli, that split was very public and often online as well.
Exactly.
When that went down. And that brings me to a slightly personal question that I didn't tell you ahead of time, because it seems to me that the discourse in Germany stands out a little bit. What difference does it make that you're writing this book as a German? We all come to stories as scholars that we think, I believe, at least in the humanities, that mirror back something to us about ourselves that we didn't know or that we'd like to know more about. We come with personal connections and we don't pick topics as a kind of a neutral, detached researcher. At least I don't think that is how good books come about. And this is a good book. What role does it play that you're writing this in the positionality that you have with your experience in Bremen on the stands, but also as a German? And me as an Austrian by implication, of course.
Yeah, it plays a big role. And it's a good question. It plays a big role because what I learned in Bremen was that football has these two sides. Soccer has these two sides, and it has this big potential for belonging, for agency, for anti-discrimination. And it plays a big role because what these four clubs really tell us and why they matter so much is that they tell us how these four cities, nations, football clubs engage with Jews, Jewish history, and the Holocaust. And it is not by incident that Ajax and Tottenham started their Jew club identity as an appropriation in the 1970s, the time when Holocaust memory became a big thing in these countries, when there was this TV series shown and the public debated in the Netherlands. Well, are we only victims of Germany? What about collaboration? There were these new discussions. And it was after the 6-Day War, and the perception of Israel was a hot topic. So after 1945, there was, okay, this is the state of the victims of the Holocaust. They deserve a state. They deserve solidarity. And after the state started to become a strong military power in the region, people started to perceive Israel differently. And there was this new idea that Israel is a villain, that they are, this bad comparison, that they are the new Nazis and whatever was out there in public discourse.
That's the bloodthirsty Jew. Another.
Yeah. And I end the book with a reflection on what do these clubs tell us about Holocaust memory in Europe, and with kind of making the case that there is no working off the past. It's not just something we can leave behind, but it's something we have to work through and do it consistently, because it's not something we can get over, because it's so deeply part of the European nations. And with England, we have an exception because they did win the war and they liberated the world from Nazism as part of these states. But they still have these, I don't know, this Holocaust memory in their Jew club identity. I remember the story of this Spurs fan Daniel, who came from a family which survived because of the Kindertransporte, children transports from Germany to England.
Yeah.
And he always had the plan to travel to Germany to understand this family history and the history of Nazism related to the family. And he never went. It was East Germany. He heard about the racism there. He didn't want to go. He said, oh, no, I do it another time. And then there was a Champions League match between RB Leipzig and Tottenham Hotspur, and immediately said, Mom, now we're going. And together with his mother, he traveled, I believe, for 8 days or 6. They made 8 stops in 6 days or something. They had this tour of grandma's house, former concentration camp site, museums. And then on the last day, I believe, they went to this game between Leipzig and Tottenham. And he has written a blog post about it. And in it, he describes the look in the eye of the mother when they were chanting "Yet Army" in this German stadium after this tour. And like, okay, this is a moment of survival, of pride, of memory, of Jewish, and all of this happens around this Jew club in this football stadium. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a story that matters, and this tells us a lot about what's going on as Jew clubs and how this is related to Holocaust memory. Maybe the focus on Holocaust memory is related to my my identity as a German, my I don't know, growing up in Germany and talking to my grandfather about his time in Nazism and so on. Mm-hmm. But I would guess that a scholar from England, from the US, from another country or background, a Jewish scholar, whatever, could have taken the same perspective and the same core topics or takeaways from the book, because it's in these club identities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it does, at least it reminds me, as helpful as I find the concept of the Jew imaginary framework, and calling these clubs not Jewish clubs, but Jew clubs. And you're right. As much as this is about concepts, as much as this is about representation, the last few years and stories like this one, which is in the book and lovely, bring back to me the reality that, yeah, damn it, it still is about actual Jews, at least to some extent. This question is, and actual Jewish lives and stories, as many concepts as centuries of anti-Semitism and philosemitism have layered over it. That human reality is still there. Exactly,
and yeah, one. If I can say one more thing that is important to me is that in scholarship we often talk about linguistic reclamation when it comes to a minority taking on a slur like gay, queer, the N-word. But here we have not two groups, like not an attacking group like the rival fans who chant something anti-Semitic, and then a group like Spurs or Ajax fans taking over the slur and changing its meaning and responding to it. But actually, we have another group there, which is part of both groups or not, and it's Jews. So it's more like a triangle. It's not like in linguistic reclamation. It's more like a triangle, which overlaps because Jews can be part of Chelsea fans chanting Hitler should gas them again, and they can be part of Tottenham or not. So in a way, they are participants, but they are also bystanders to the discrimination and the appropriation.
Can I ask you... what do you hope, or at least what had you hoped and what you have already seen, the book has been out now for a little bit, that the book adds to football studies, histories of soccer, cultural studies of soccer, and what do you hope it adds to the field of Jewish studies? And my assumption is those can be two different things. Where do you see the book going in terms of bringing those discourses forward?
Yes, I strongly believe the strength of the book is its interdisciplinarity and the way it bridges or brings together these two fields in a way. And what football studies, I don't know, can learn, or what I believe this brings to football studies is the link between collective memories and collective identities in these clubs. And if scholars, for instance, talk about the traditionalism of fans and fan groups, that there is a framework around it, and this is national history, the various identity groups living in a city, are they present, are they not? And if we talk about the Traditionsclub idea and so on, that is so important in football. There's a layer that we can better understand if we bring something in from Jewish studies, might also be other fields of study, but where we look at these complex identities. And there are, for instance, a mistake, I believe, in the perception of Landauer, and sometimes he's written about as a Mitbürger jüdischen Glaubens, as a fellow citizen of Jewish faith. And he was not a Mitbürger, he was a Bürger, he was a citizen, he understood himself as a Bavarian, and he was a secular Jew, so he was not of Jewish faith, but he was not religious.
Yes.
But he was a secular Jew, a concept that we today have difficulty understanding from the post-Holocaust perspective.
As were many early Zionists.
And then to Jewish studies, popular culture in general can add a lot to Jewish studies in the way that it goes beyond the study of high culture and avoids also the link of Jews and intellectuals to a certain degree or something, and shows. This book is not really about the Jews in these clubs, but about the perception. But at the same time, it shows how Jewish people contributed to these clubs and how much they mattered to the sport and the development of the sport. And we would not have football the way it is without the many Jews who were part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And this link that is at the core of the book between collective memory and collective identity is something that I believe football has a unique opportunity to understand and study this connection, which is difficult to see elsewhere. Where is a space where the society comes together in the way it comes in football? It's a space where, 40,000, 80,000 people come together at the same space. They see each other. They are sitting in an oval space. They see each other as a mass culture. They experience themselves as part of something that is of extreme importance to the people in this place, or many people at least. Or they even, just while having a cigarette break or standing in front of a school, you can discuss about the game and certain players, and you would also discuss at some point certain identities of these clubs.
And the stadium, the modern stadium, for all its sanitized versions, and Tottenham is among the worst in that category, the stadium is still a relatively unfiltered place. So if we're looking, if I'm a historian, we always look for primary sources that get as close as possible to the main characters here who did the saying and the doing at the time that it happened. A football stadium is a nice place to get up close and a space in which things are sayable.
Yeah, exactly.
That shouldn't be said anymore, and that aren't sayable elsewhere too.
Yeah, exactly. In the conclusion of the book, I make this argument that now we have all this memory culture in Europe. People in the US are even writing books like How to Learn from the Germans, I believe is the title of one book. And it goes around memory culture. And I try to show that there are many flaws to this memory culture and limits, specifically to institutionalized memory culture. And that something unconscious, uncomfortable with the history, the way it's dealt with, talked about, the memory culture, break through in these stadiums. It comes to the surface. And the stadium is a space where it really kind of, these performances, 5,000 people chanting "Get Army" or chanting "Hitler should gas them again" are really confronting us. Like, okay, what is memory culture actually doing? Where is it successful? Where it is not? And people have a strong desire to engage with these histories and these identities, and the football fans really throw it into our faces that there's something to work through, and still is.
And that is something that football fans and Jews have in common. They ask questions of those around them, often whether they want it or not, by existing and by speaking. Well, is there a follow-up research that comes out of this? Was there a point that you said afterwards, here is one strand or one figure from this book that I'd like to work on more? What does the future hold for you in this line of work?
I continue to thinking about this idea of the Jew imaginary framework in broader terms. Is it transferable to other contexts?
Yeah.
And I try to think more about a concept that is part of this Jew imaginary framework, because it's not only about the Jew as other, as an abstract figure of imagination, but also as a space for Jewish agency and perspectives, something I call minority subjectivity in the book. So what are the experiences and perspectives of the people affected by these images? And at the moment, I'm working on a research project in Heidelberg on anti-Gypsyism, anti-Roma racism in German Carnival. There are dozens of villages in Germany where people during Carnival season dress up as gypsies. Even the term is problematic, and they were persecuted similar to the Jews. There were hundreds of thousands killed. The Germans tried to eradicate them from the earth, like they tried with Jews. They wanted to have this Volkskörper, and we know all this. Mm-hmm. And what does it mean that today Germans dress up as this figure? They do fire, they cook like they imagine that a gypsy would cook, and all of this. And so I go to these places. I try to see what they're doing, how they dress, how their soup tastes. All of it. How they are telling the future through card reading. And this is, I believe, a continuation in a way, in a different context of the questions I'm asking in this book.
Okay, so you're not another football book in the works for now.
For now, not. No.
Well, maybe in the future.
Yeah. I have some articles I'm working on. One also on Bayern Munich, on the memory culture there. So kind of a continued thinking. What is going on there, but then one main focus at the moment is on the Carnival, and of course on the German translation of this book.
Have you heard back from either supporters of these clubs, or from the clubs directly? Probably not as much, but from supporters, reactions to the book that have said, "Oh, good point," or that have disagreed with critiques of discourse that you're leveling as well?
Disagreed so far not. I expect that I will also receive some criticism, but so far I didn't. The most wonderful feedback actually came from some Jewish Tottenham supporters who were writing emails or reaching out. Really touching emails. I was really, really touched by what they said about that they always had this kind of Jewish connection of the club, and they didn't really understand the history or had questions about where did it actually come from, why Tottenham, when and how did it start, what are the main factors that played into it, and that the chapter I wrote on Tottenham really helped them to make sense of it's their identity. They are Jews and Tottenham supporters, and it's so important to them, and that this book could add a little bit to knowing more about this identity and maybe feeling, differently perhaps, or getting some questions answered is really wonderful and all I could hope for.
Now, on Tottenham particularly, I've made that same experience, especially in the global diaspora of Tottenham supporters. I think those are stories that are not very well known. There's legions of American Tottenham fans who I think know very little about this part of their club story. That is good. That is good feedback. I will say I do have a second football loyalty. The English club is West Ham, and there's many stories of precisely what you're describing involving West Ham fans over against Tottenham. So I see a bit of not a mirror to me personally, but I think it's helpful for fans from other clubs to read this as well. It's not.
There's also this
strictly Jewish history.
There's also this TV series I'm discussing in the book, how Das ist apart, I believe, where the anti-hero is a West Ham fan and he's ranting about the Tottenham Hits, and it was BBC Two in the 60s to 1980s, very successful, and it really helped popularizing this Jew club identity of Tottenham. And the actor actually was a Tottenham supporter in the West Ham scarf, so that's also an interesting anecdote.
I did not know that. Okay, all right, good. Werder Bremen, you're back in Germany. Are you attending games again? Are you doing away travels? You're based in Heidelberg. I think Hoffenheim is the closest club to you.
Yeah.
You go again? Are you back in the Werder groove?
I do have a season ticket since 1999, 27 years, and I'm not going
You haven't given it
every
up
game.
while you were in the US?
I did not know. I gave it to other people. In the 1990s, it was still very easy to get a season ticket. You could just go to the fan shop and buy it. And today you have a closed waiting list. So I believe probably at someday, hopefully my daughter asks for the season ticket and I can give it to her and she will give it to someone else. And it's more like this now, even though the games are not enjoyable in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yes. Well, you came in the glory days, 90s. Werder was a main rival of Bayern Munich back then. And
I remember very well the 8th of May 2004 when I was in Munich and we won 3-1 and won the German championship. Different days. Yeah.
Is that the era of the orange jerseys?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I remember that. Very good. And if you see somebody from Graz in the stands at Werder, say hi for me, unbeknownst. I know there's a storm full of people frequently.
Happy to do it.
Others too, yeah. Good. Thank you so much for sharing an academic and very accessible book, a book that is about Jews and yet not, that is about these 4 clubs and is way more than a club history. Go out and buy it. Indiana University Press has it. It's out in paperback as well. And the updated version is in those copies as well that Pavel talked about. Good. Thank you very much for your time. Be well, and greetings to Germany.
Thank you very much, Philip.
A lot to think about there. And if one of the clubs we discussed actually is your club, I would be curious about your take. How have you experienced this part of this club's past and present? If you're a Tottenham fan, if you hold Ajax, or with Bayern, or with Austria Vienna, does this strand of identity and discussion around identity influence anything of your fandom? In the meantime, I will very likely take a spring break for the next episode, so that will be 2 weeks after this one. Hope you have a good morning, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening to this now. Follow on the social media platforms in the meantime, and I look forward to being back with you.